Everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a roundtable on financial planning for the disability community. My name is Rachel Fackender, and I will serve as the panel moderator. This webinar has American Sign Language interpretation as well as Spanish language translation. Before we begin, I'm going to turn it over to Maria to give a brief overview on how to access the Spanish channel.
Good morning. Buenos días. Mi nombre es María Angélica. Mis pronombres son ella y ellas. Y hoy estaremos proveyendo interpretación en español con Our Language Services para asegurarnos de que la información que se va a compartir hoy sea accesible para todos, sin importar el idioma que prefiremos. Para activar la interpretación, por favor hagan clic en el globo abajo que dice interpretación en su computador, eligen español y eso es todo. Ahora, si están conectando desde su teléfono, por favor toquen los 3 puntos abajo a la derecha que dicen más, elija interpretación de idiomas y escoge el idioma que prefiere. Al final, arriba a mano derecha, por favor toque finalizar. Si tienen alguna pregunta de interpretación o dificultad, por favor déjenoslo saber en el chat y con mucho gusto les apoyaremos. También estamos poniendo esas instrucciones en el chat. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we're still looking forward to our conversation today, and we really wanted to bring it forward because our relationship with money is so important. And the key to success is, of course, equipping yourself with the knowledge and the skills needed to manage money effectively. Now, this wasn't always the case for the disability community, but now saving is a reality with ABLE United. So as part of our discussion today, we're going to be covering topics like saving and investing, the current financial landscape, and ways in which you can fully optimize an ABLE United account. I am joined by ABLE United Director John Finch and Certified Financial Planner Keith Seago. Keith also serves as an ABLE United account administrator for his daughter and one of our ambassadors in the South Florida area. These two advocates collectively bring more than 30 years in their respective industries and are very passionate about helping individuals and families build a foundation of financial education so they can begin saving for the future without fear. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I want to call out a couple of just housekeeping tips. I know Maria walked everyone through how to transition over to the Spanish channel, but I also want to make sure everyone also has the opportunity to submit questions, and you'll see that in the Zoom panel as well. But we are going to run a few quick polls just to get some additional information from our attendees. And the first one that we're going to run is just to see how familiar you all are with ABLE United. We're going to let that run for a couple of seconds. We'll give it about 10 more seconds to have everyone answer their question before we show those results. All right, we're going to go ahead and close that poll. Okay, so it's a little bit all over the place, but it looks like about 43% of you are somewhat familiar, so that is good. And for those that are not familiar at all, we are going to make sure that you are familiar by the end of this webinar. And we're going to go ahead and run just one more poll, because in addition to our attendees, we also have some waiver support coordinators and supported living coaches joining us. And we just want to gauge that if you need a training certificate following this webinar, that we have that information on file. So we're going to go ahead and run that real quick. And of course, for those that join late, if they do in fact need a training certificate after this webinar, you can email us at info@ableunited.com. So let's go ahead and close that poll. Imagine a large percentage is going to say yes to get that 1 credit for attending the webinar. Okay, so half and half. No, got it. Good to see that. So again, thank you all for being here today. We are so excited about this conversation and to have both John and Keith with us. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So Keith, let's kind of start this conversation with the basics. Talk to us a little bit about the concept of saving.
Hey, Rachel. Hey, everyone. Thank you for attending this conference today. As a financial planner, some of the efforts on my part are to help build a foundation for financial health, financial security. That begins with an emergency fund or a rainy day fund, if you'd like. It's a way to establish a liquid, readily available source of funds that could be available if you need it in some sort of unanticipated emergency, such as sudden or unexpected unemployment due to a layoff, illness, or an injury, maybe a home and auto repair, a new roof. And for our folks in South Florida or Southwest Florida who just went through that horrible Hurricane Ian event, an emergency fund is readily apparent why you might need it. But before you go any further into the world of investments or wealth accumulation, income accumulation, establishing that foundational emergency fund, which typically we suggest is 3 to 6 months of income to support your expenses is what we recommend.
Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about saving, but what about investing? Can you speak very generally about investing and how it works?
I sure can. Yeah. In general, not in specific, I won't be making recommendations for stocks or bonds today. But in general, investing is placing money into the market where for an additional amount of risk, which is something I want to make sure everybody hears, you could anticipate the possibility of an additional return. So for example, you might invest into your business. That clearly is an investment with a hope of growing your business and growing your improving your lifestyle. It could be your children's education, or it could be the stock market. And I think for our purposes today, the stock market is kind of a place where for a long time, over 100 years, investors have been placing funds, typically for the purpose of purchasing companies that are available, like a Google, like a IBM, like a General Motors, et cetera, or into funds that purchase those companies. This permits us to have the possibility of appreciating or growing our money. But please remember, this is not the casino. This is not the lottery. Perhaps some people might consider the stock market in those similar terms. But please know that investing always accompanies some sort of risk.
Absolutely. So, John, I want to kind of talk about, specifically how an individual can take advantage of saving investing in the disability community, right? Because this is a newer concept. The ABLE Act wasn't passed until 2015, and then ABLE United became a reality here in the state of Florida in 2016. So talk to us a little bit about how individuals can save and invest within the disability community.
Thanks, Rachel, and good morning, everybody. Thank you all for taking some time this morning to talk about financial planning and ABLE accounts. So high level, if you think historically for the disability population, for individuals with severe diagnoses, they were kind of restricted, especially when it came to relying on general public benefit programs, such as supplemental security income or Medicaid. Which really, unfortunately, those types of programs requires an individual to basically live in poverty, where they're not allowed to have more than $2,000. And so, foundationally, you think about 15, 16 years ago, families got around a dining room table and said, why isn't there a way for me to start putting funds away to build up some of that emergency savings funds for my family member, without impacting those benefits. And so through a lot of those parents and self-advocates' hard work, the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, or better known as the ABLE Act, passed, and each state could pass their own ABLE Act. So we passed the Florida ABLE Act to kind of determine how the state of Florida was to set up their ABLE program. And so what the ABLE Act did was allow these different states to create online, predominantly tax advantage savings and investment accounts unique to this community. And that the money saved in the account typically doesn't count towards that $2,000 asset limit. In addition, similar to, for example, a Roth IRA, where you're putting after-tax dollars in the account, the funds can grow tax-free and then be used for a variety of expenditures. And if you think about who qualifies, I think is important to relay that here, is it's not just anybody that has a diagnosis. It has to be a severe mental incapacitation or diagnosis that impacts somebody's daily living. So whether that be something that you might have diagnosed at birth, such as Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. It might be diagnosed a little bit later, like autism spectrum disorder, or individuals who might have a later diagnosed with a blindness or deafness. And so thinking of those types of severe disabilities, they would qualify, but that diagnosis had to occur prior to age 26. It doesn't matter your age now. We have individuals in the program that are in their 80s, and we have newborns. So it's pretty cool on who qualifies. And like I mentioned, this is the state of Florida's ABLE program. Each state kind of gets to set up their own program. Most of them are set up to do online enrollment, and we're in the same boat where if you want to start the account, go to ableunited.com. Takes 20 minutes or so. But I think what's unique about this program compared to maybe some of your other financial products is that the person that owns the account is the individual with the disability. It's their funds, they get to own it. They can put their own money in it, or other people can. But sometimes, they might not have the capacity, whether that be mentally or financially, and don't want to run the account. And so somebody can establish it on their behalf. That could be a parent, guardian, power of attorney, and even expanded to include a sibling, a spouse, a grandparent, or even a representative payee under Social Security Administration. So that's kind of what the ABLE account allows individuals to do in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I think it's important too, folks that are joining us may be familiar, for those that answered our poll, may be somewhat familiar with an ABLE United account, but they might have also heard of a special needs trust and get them confused. So Keith, I'm gonna let you kind of walk us through what is the biggest difference between ABLE accounts and special needs trusts?
Sure. So about 6 years ago, probably when I first heard a presentation from John about the ABLE United account, I was considering a special needs trust for my daughter. She qualified for SSI. She was on Medicaid. And so I was very much aware in my practice that, it would be very difficult for her to accumulate funds without jeopardizing those benefits. And then John's presentation on the ABLE account really caught my eye. And I established one for the benefit of my daughter. And for a number of reasons. The ABLE account, in contrast, let's say, for example, with the special needs trust, is that it doesn't require any attorney to create legal documents, a trust, to hold those assets to prevent her funds from being jeopardized or her resources. So no cost or minimal cost. It had some tax advantage benefits that the trust did not have. It was something that could be funded actually from a special needs trust. We could put money in from her special needs trust into the ABLE account. So they're not mutually exclusive. They actually could be complementary for many families. The limits of the ABLE account are really just how much money you can put in per year, which is on a cap of around 16,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, John. Per year. Okay, good. And it allows those monies to be kept as safe as an FDIC bank account, or it allows those monies to be invested. The special needs trust has no such caps or limitations. And it also has the ability to hold other assets, such as real estate in the special needs trust. So depending on your structure, the ABLE account is the very easy way in which you can help enrich your beneficiary's lifestyle without jeopardizing those benefits, and with a very low cost approach to establishing that account.
Okay, so let's do a little bit of a scenario here, right? Someone's listening in, they're going to go to ableunited.com and open up their ABLE account. John, talk to me a little bit about the enrollment process and how easy it is to get started saving. Who can contribute to an account? A little bit about our gifting page. Just kind of give us a high-level overview of that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, this is an online enrollment process. So you would go to ableunited.com, there to go open the account. You start off with entering an email address, but you would need some personal identification information for the beneficiary. And then if somebody is opening it on behalf of them, their information as well. So if you think of just about any other financial product, we're going to need to identify who you are. So date of birth, Social Security number, address, phone number, those points of contact. And then also what's unique is our program, to verify that, we usually ask 4 or 5 questions of whoever's going to be managing the account. And this could be simple as, are you associated with one of these banks, or what was the color of your 2020 Honda Civic? So it's, it looks into your credit history a little bit to see who you are. And then after that, you confirm that everything is correct, and then you go to the process of actually selecting your investments and savings options. The process itself takes about 15 to 20 minutes or so. I actually recently attended the National Federation of Blind conference and met several people who actually have an ABLE United account and told me, it's very screen reader friendly. And so we pride ourselves on that, making sure that it's accessible to all. So it's, like I said, it takes 15, 20 minutes. One of the questions, I hear this a lot, Rachel, from people is, can you have multiple individuals oversee the account?
Right.
So for example, you have 2 parents, you have a grandparent and a daughter that wants to raise it for their grandchild. Unfortunately, at this time, no. But it is important to know that the owner of the account, so the individual with a disability, has access to their account at any time as long as they're 18 or older. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're chunking in a bunch of money, you're hitting that $16,000 each calendar year, and then your beneficiary who might have capacity turns 18, they can tap into that ABLE account. So that kind of goes into your planning on how much money you're putting into the ABLE account and what really, what the purpose of that account is for.
That's right. And, through that enrollment process, individuals have the opportunity to set a savings goal, which is great. And it is an optional step, but we recommend that you don't skip it. You take some time to really think about, what are your savings goals with your ABLE United account, and also consider opening that gifting page, right? Maybe you don't want another toy or, something more physical and tangible in your home. And rather, a grandparent, aunt or uncle give money into an ABLE account. You can do that with the gifting page. It's kind of set up like a GoFundMe, really easy to use. And as Keith mentioned, you can save, with the help of family and friends, all the way up to $16,000 per calendar year. So really, really great benefits. But I want to spend a little bit of time, we've talked about, how you get your ABLE account set up and how you start saving, but let's break down the investment piece, because, we are, very excited to be able to offer 8 different options for our account holders. So Keith, I want you to kind of walk us through an overview of our pre-designed options. So we have 3 of those and what their different benefits are.
Sure. So as you asked me early on, what is an emergency fund? I would suggest that the ABLE account is very well suited to building an emergency fund in the money market or the FDIC options accounts. And then for monies that accumulate above and beyond your emergency fund, you can start to think more intermediate or longer term for the purpose of those monies. Able has done an outstanding job in partnering with some of the largest and most successful money managers in the country by establishing a predetermined portfolio that aligns with you or your beneficiaries' objectives. 3 such accounts exist: a conservative, a moderate, and a growth account. So as you can imagine, a conservative account or a conservative investment portfolio is going to have less risk, and over a longer period of time will probably not grow as quickly as a moderate or as a growth account. But again, given your time horizons, in other words, how much time before you expect to use those monies, you may want to be more conservative or more growth oriented. For example, my daughter wanted to accumulate monies to purchase an automobile. So with the help of her father, who matched her contributions because she was able to work somewhat, we were able to put money away in a conservative fund that over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, I think it ended up being 4 years, we had accumulated enough money through growth and through contributions to purchase that car. So it's a very easy way for even a novice to be able to get money into the market, as long as they're willing to accept the risk and they have the time to have it professionally managed, consistent with your objectives and risk tolerance.
Right.
And then finally, beyond that, there is that FDIC account we mentioned earlier. And there's also the ability for a more savvy investor, someone who maybe has a little more familiarity with the markets, to build their own portfolios using a stock fund or a bond fund or an international stock fund that is available on the Able platform.
That's right. And, I love hearing the story about your daughter, saving to buy a car. We absolutely love hearing those stories. I would say a large percentage of our account holders, open their Able United account just to save, but some of them have clear intent of saving for something. We've heard of, cars, we've heard of, wheelchair adjustments. We've heard of people buying their first home or a therapy dog. It really is just so great. We love hearing those stories. And for anyone that is joining us today, if you have a story of how you've utilized your Able United account, drop us a line. We want to hear that. We love sharing that on our blog or on our organic social media channels. So always, be sure to let us know how you're using your account. We love to hear those stories. So John, I want to kind of bring it back to you a little bit to talk about how account holders can actually change how their money is allocated. Keith's covered a lot of the investment pieces, but this is a question that we get a lot about is, how often can I change my allocations with investments, and are there any fees associated with them?
That's a good question, but I wanted to kind of add to your conversation and even to Keith about what you can use the funds in the account for, right? Predominantly, we do see most individuals are still savers. They're put in, a set amount, either that be systematic contributions through a connected bank account. They're having their special needs trust and then a check, monthly, quarterly, or even annually. Or, they set up that gifting portal, allows people to contribute to it. But then, the question is, well, what can I use these funds for? I start accumulating them. And the unique thing is that the Treasury really made this broad, and they even said, we're going to give you 13 categories, but then have this caveat where it's to be construed broadly. And those broad buckets include anywhere from transportation, as we mentioned, purchasing a car. We have a debit card, prepaid reloadable debit card people can use, and we get kind of a history of a high level types of merchants that they're using those cards from. So we see people filling up their car for gas or actually using Uber to get to places, or other transportation ride sharing services. So transportation is pretty broad. And then housing, whether that be paying for your taxes for your home, paying your monthly rent mortgage, whether that be to a landlord or to your parents, or other types of housing related expenditures. It can include basic living expenses, which I think is pretty unique, right? So if you think of clothes shopping, back to school shopping that, a few of us with children went through a few months back, it could be even, going out to eat occasionally. And then the other broad ones can include medical, it can include financial, legal, even funeral and burial. And so it's pretty broad. And the unique thing is Treasury said, we'll give you one example. And let's say you had an individual who their disability impacted their ability to communicate effectively. So a cell phone and a cell phone plan to help navigate and communicate would be a qualified disability expense. So you can't give the funds away. You can't purchase Rachel gifts. You can't, go gambling with the money. But at the end of the day, if it's for the benefit of the individual and it's going to help improve or maintain their health, independence, or quality of life, then you can use the funds in the ABLE account. And so now to go back to your original question about money allocated into the account, and as Keith was saying, the different options we have available. And actually, I just did some transaction reviews on people who did move money around based on their needs. And so money going into the account, you get to pick and choose how you want that to be set up. Anytime you contribute, you can choose a new fund option or leave it the same. It's really up to you. You get to pick and choose where you want that money to go. For individuals who, when you take money out, you get to pick and choose. So keeping your investments and your savings separate. So as Keith was mentioning, your emergency fund, maybe you don't want to take money out of that. Maybe you want to take it out of the investment side, or vice versa. Maybe you want to dip into the FDIC savings option. You really have the freedom and the flexibility to take out money from any of the options you've contributed to. And there's no fees associated for doing that. So, if you take out money via check, we're not going to charge you for that. If you choose a different one of the investment options, really the only fees tied to them are your investment, what we call investment advisor fees. And that's a small percentage that's taking out. And so when you see the returns on your investments or your FDIC savings option, that's net of those fees. And the FDIC option has no fees. And so it's even I think our most expensive one is less than 29 cents for every $100 you have in the account. It's very, very minimal fees tied to those. And then for money that's already invested in the account, so for example, maybe you had $5,000 in a very risky product, and you're like, okay, well, I plan on putting a down payment on a vehicle in a few months, and you want to transfer that to the FDIC option. So money that's already in the program can be moved around twice per calendar year.
That's right. Now, this question's for both of you, and I feel like we would be remiss not to address it. There's a lot of volatility in the market right now, right? And we're experiencing inflation in the United States. We get asked this question a lot over the last couple of months. What advice would you give to individuals and to families as it relates to the current financial landscape?
Let me take that first.
Thanks, Keith.
Tighten your seatbelts and stick to your plan. The market periodically goes through these corrections, as we like to call them in my business. They're painful, they're unpleasant, but they're part of the overall market. What really benefits someone to be able to sustain themselves through these unsettling times is the time they have in the market. We have found, while history doesn't always repeat itself, we have found consistently that the market does recover, and over time, the market does appreciate in terms of investing, which speaks to each and every one of you that my advice to one person is going to be different from everybody else that I talk with, because your circumstances, your situation, your objectives are all going to be different. but don't invest for how you expect your money to do in a year. Invest for the long term, unless, of course, your objectives are short term. And if you don't have, in my opinion, 3 to 5 years or longer to invest, you should probably stay away from the stock market. And obviously, as John just articulated, there are very safe options that will protect your money from the ups and downs of the stock market.
And so what I'll do for you to add to Keith is I'll read you our footer statement on our website. Because I'm not an attorney or a financial advisor. Historically, my background's in social work, so you definitely don't want me giving you legal, tax, or financial advice. But we say on our website, I think this is important to consider, is performance of the program discussed is not guaranteed and is subject to market conditions, among other things. So carefully consider your objectives, your risks, charges, and expenses before investing, right? And as with any investment, it's possible to lose money by investing in this program. And I think that's, to Keith's point, right? What is your plan, right? If you wanted to buy groceries next week, probably investing in the most riskiest option may not be wise. But if it's something where I'm not touching this funds for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's a different conversation. And to Keith's point, everybody's unique, everybody is different, and even to your emergency fund, right? As a family of how many people are in my family? 5, I think. I have 3 boys and a spouse. So with the 5 of us, my emergency fund's going to look different than Rachel's, for example, right? I got to think of feeding my children. So I used to joke that when people had food, I always say feed the Finch Foundation was my nonprofit to help feed my family. But that's neither here nor there. So that's a great way to think about when you think about investing and saving.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to take some questions from our attendees. Just as a reminder to those that are joining us today to please take advantage of the Q&A box in the Zoom panel. Looking at a few here on my other screen, John, this one's for you. For those that have gone through the enrollment process or currently have an account, who is Vestwell? And are their funds safe? Electronic banking is obviously huge in today's day and age. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay. Hopefully I won't use jargon that is too complicated to interpret. But so the way Able United is set up here in the state of Florida is we rely on third-party vendors to help us achieve program goals and to meet the requirements that we're held to under Florida statute and federal statute. And so we outsource our back-end record-keeping system. And so historically, that was with Bank of New York Mellon. They had an entity inside of their organization called Someday. So that was the customer user-facing interface. They recently, at the end of last year, sold that part of their company off to what they call a fintech, so a financial tech organization called Vestwell. And so you might see some logo changes on our website, some name changes from Someday to Vestwell. And so Vestwell is a leader in this space across many other states. I think they run about 20 or so other states' ABLE programs on this Vestwell platform. And so, when it comes to security and risk, they have a very robust group that is constantly looking at this. Historically, when there's a concern about risk or the safety of my account, unfortunately, it comes down to just your password and protecting that, right? You use your email to log in, but if your password is the bare minimum for security, and it's something familiar, like something you would post on your social media, like your dog's name and your date of birth, those are easily accessible to find out. And so it's having a really a secure password. But we have companies that have billions of dollars invested that we're using their type of software to make sure that this is as safest product as we can for our end customer.
That's right. Okay, another great question that we do get quite frequently. And what happens to Able United account funds when the beneficiary passes away, John?
All right, so this is another frequently asked question. After people say, what can I use the money for? They ask, what happens if the beneficiary passes away? And so some more recent news, we added the ability to have a successor designated beneficiary. So if the beneficiary passes, they can designate this fund. However, it is restricted federally to, it has to be a sibling who also qualifies for an ABLE account. So if you don't meet that requirement, you're going to kind of default into our current process, which would be whoever's overseeing the account continue to make withdrawals to pay for any outstanding qualified disability expenses. Once all outstanding qualified disability expenses are paid, so whether that be funeral, burial, they had, outstanding credit card bill, whatever that case may be, any leftover funds would typically go to the estate of the beneficiary. So Medicaid, for example, if they were on Medicaid services, Medicaid cannot file a claim directly on the ABLE account. However, if the funds go to their estate may be subject to Medicaid recovery, which there is some exceptions. So for example, they have to be 55 or older. They can't have a surviving spouse or children that they're still in care of. So it's important to think about that longevity of the ABLE account, what you plan on doing with it, what are your end goals, right? I see a question here about special needs trust. ABLE accounts aren't really to help you accumulate tremendous amount of money. More so, it's kind of, the purpose of the account is a down payment on a home, but you can use it for that retirement account. But it's thinking, hey, if they're over the age of 55 and on Medicaid, you might need to have a plan in place to spin this account down before they pass.
That's right. And, so tying back into, special needs trust, just looking at this question that we have here, and Keith, John, feel free to kind of tag team this answer. One specific question is, why have the trust if you already have an Able United account? Kind of why would you need the trust if you have the Able accounts? So can you answer that question for us?
I'll take a stab. A couple of reasons. Again, because of the ability to accumulate a lot more assets inside the special needs trust, including non-financial assets, like I mentioned earlier. Maybe it's a home, maybe it's another piece of real estate. The special needs trust can accommodate those type of non-financial assets. And it's possible that you want a third-party trustee to control those assets for the benefit of your beneficiary. And the special needs trust anticipates that time when you want a third party taking care of that trust for the benefit of that beneficiary. And
I'm sure the answer to this specific question probably varies, but they're curious is how much can you expect to pay for an attorney to set up a trust? Is there some sort of ballpark range?
Yeah, it goes to Keith's point, right? And even what we talked about earlier, everybody's unique and depends on how complicated it can be. I've heard of ranges from, a 1,500, 2,000 to 5,000 plus, right? If it's multiple individuals involved, if you're talking about, multiple different grandparents, and it's going to be funded with, different insurance policies and how difficult and complex it can be, because they can be pretty complex. Because if you think of a special needs trust, that whole part of estate planning, what happens to my estate if I pass, my house, my vehicles, if you have multiple homes or vehicles, how that gets distributed, if you have multiple banking, savings, and investment accounts. So all those things can be tied into a special needs trust. And then, how it goes about being divvied out. So it is a complex question that, it just depends on the complexity of your estate.
John,
Now-
let me offer a personal
Sure.
aside, because I have created a special needs trust for my daughter, but it doesn't get funded until my wife and I pass.
Hmm.
So clearly, a special needs trust can be in the kind of in the waiting room until the parents, for example, in our case, pass and leave an inheritance for our children. Well, for the purposes of inheritance for my child, my daughter who's has the disability, we don't want to shut down her benefits because she's the beneficiary of a third of our estate as one of 3 children. So her share will go into the special needs trust at that time and will not, permit the interruption of her benefits.
Now, where does one find an attorney to set this up? I know that there's lots of different resources and lots of different attorneys that are, well equipped in the state of Florida to help individuals with this. But where do you go about finding one, and what are kind of the qualities that you look for in an attorney?
Well, I'll again try to answer that question. John and I attend every year the elder law section of the Florida Bar that has an audience of no less than 150 elder law board certified attorneys. The elder law section is particularly appropriate to seek this kind of counsel in these type of structures. And then, of course, estate planning attorneys, that's, another section within the Florida Bar is estate planning. So I would kind of seek out those practitioners who specialize in elder law. Even though you may have a child, elder law deals with these kinds of structures like special needs trust or estate planning attorneys.
Yeah, and I would add to, when you do find somebody, is to ask them questions. How many special needs trusts have they set up in over the past year? Those types of questions that are going to get more information on, is this the right attorney for you? And then also talking to your peers to have also gone through this, have set up special needs trust. And then I think most all bar associations that are local, so if you look for your county's bar association or your city's bar association, they usually have an attorney referral service where they can point you into, if you tell them your needs, they can point you to some qualified attorneys.
That's right. So we're going to take a couple more questions. This is another really good one because this has been in the news and, people have been talking a little bit about this, but Able Age Adjustment Act, John, give us the rundown.
Yep. Okay, so for longtime listeners, first-time guests, when we talked about the requirements for an ABLE account, there's this age 26, that has to be the diagnosis. It doesn't matter their age now. So where did this come from? So historically, when this was being worked on and trying to be passed, the Congressional Budget Office kind of reviews legislation and says, if this was to pass, this is how much it's going to cost. And you have to have offsets so that it equals out and it's not impacting the budget. And so when ABLE first passed, came out and they reviewed it, it says it's going to cost, on their assumptions and looking at how many people could be eligible for ABLE accounts, it was going to cost, upwards of $10 billion, like $1 billion a year. And so they had to lower that amount. And so they say if we capped it at a diagnosis at age 26, that lowered it significantly. However, since it's rolled out this program, it's still one of these underutilized resources that is out there. To date, a little over 110,000 people in the U.S. have an ABLE account. And so legislation is moving to bump that age of onset or the age of diagnosis from 26 to 46. And so currently it's passed the Senate. It's being tied into hopefully a much larger tax bill since this is a tax type of product. And so we're seeing where that's going to land towards the end of this year. Of course, if you check your mail or you're getting text all the times, it is a political type of year. So everybody's running for re-election, and so it's kind of taking to the wayside right now. But hopefully, it'll be picked up by the end of the year, if not early year, and that could jump up from 26 to 46, which would really expand it to people who have a diagnosis that happened later in life.
So a couple other questions. Can an ABLE account be transferred from state to state if we move? Well, the answer is yes. The good thing is that when you open up an ABLE United account, you have to be a Florida resident at the time of enrollment. But if you were to, move to another state, 2, 3, 4, however long years down the road, you can take your ABLE United account with you. So that is an added benefit of having an account. Another question here, someone says, Keith had mentioned that individual stocks can be contributed to. Where is that option? So there are over 5 on our website that you can look into, and it ranges truly. I know we've talked a lot about the FDIC savings fund, but John, Keith, do you guys want to just kind of give a brief rundown of what the other 4 are in addition to the FDIC?
Yeah, I'll tackle that real quick. So we have a mutual money market account, which is it's kind of like a very low risk mutual fund that's actually kind of like the state's money market account. Then we have 3 other investment products that are almost mutual fund based. They're tied to a mutual fund, but we have what we call U.S. stock that's managed by Vanguard. It's a Vanguard mutual fund. We have a U.S. bond that's a Vanguard option mutual fund as well. And then we have an international stock mutual fund type of product that's managed by BlackRock. And so these are broadly diversified already investment products. So it's not like a unique stock, like you're not buying a specific stock directly with Apple. But, the U.S. stock mutual fund that we have, it might be 0.2% Apple. So it's made up of a lot of broad types of investments. And so I encourage individuals who want all the nitty gritty detail to visit our website, and we'll link out to that mutual fund, and you can find out exactly how it's, what exactly it's invested in.
That's right. So another question here that we want to clarify. So if it was a child who had a disability as a child and is now 18 with the disability, they do not qualify for an ABLE account if they are not 26. So the answer is that they do qualify, that as long as the onset of disability happened prior to age 26, they are going to qualify, as long as they have a qualifying disability. But we're hoping that will eventually go to 46 with the Able Age Adjustment Act. We're keeping our fingers crossed so that even more individuals with disabilities in the state of Florida can qualify for an account. We'll take
I see some
2
couple
more
questions here. I thought it's pretty interesting. Is life insurance considered a qualified disability expense? That's a unique question, right? Because if you think, and Keith could probably tell you more about life insurance than I, but life insurance really is for the benefit if the person passes, is for somebody else, right? So, right. Keith's back me up.
Of course.
He's backing me up here, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think that would benefit the beneficiary side. I'm not the IRS, but I don't believe life insurance policy would be a qualified disability expense. Now, buying funeral arrangements would. So if you're buying a plot or setting up the arrangements for the funeral, that would be a qualified disability expense. But setting up a life insurance policy, that would really benefit the beneficiary of that life insurance policy, not the beneficiary of the ABLE account.
I would agree.
So we actually had several of those questions as it pertain to life insurance. But let's talk about this question, because this is, again, another question that we get a lot, John, of can you take money that you're receiving from supplemental security income and direct deposit it into an ABLE account?
Yes and no. So currently, if you want to deposit SSI funds or Social Security funds into an ABLE account, it would have to go to either the rep payee account first and then be transferred over to the ABLE account. It can hold Social Security funds. We're actually in the process of the back end to allow ABLE accounts to directly receive Social Security funds. So stay tuned. So hopefully that'll be a release end of this year, early next year, where people, instead of having that rep payee account or having a different Social Security account, they can make the ABLE account the recipient of those SSI funds. So that's my yes, no answer. Yes, it can hold it. No, there's not a direct deposit way to do it until later next year.
So one more question. I think we need some further clarification on who can open an ABLE United account.
So the ABLE United account can be opened by a Florida resident who has a disability diagnosed prior to age 26. That's the high level. Now, the disability does have to be severe. So either they're on SSI, that's that supplemental security income, or maybe they're on Social Security disability insurance. That's the earned benefits. So maybe they were working and then due to their disability can no longer work. So it has to be a severe type of disability that's impacting their daily living. And that diagnosis prior to age 26. So those are the three requirements. Florida resident, diagnosis prior to age 26. Doesn't matter their age now. And it has to be a severe type of disability.
Well, let's also cover too, who can serve as an account administrator, because I think
Correct.
that, a lot of folks, want, like Keith does,
Yeah.
he serves as an account administrator for his daughter, but his daughter is the beneficiary of the account.
Correct. And so somebody can provide that, what we call authorized legal representative. They can manage the account, and that could range depending on the beneficiary themselves to a guardian, power of attorney, representative payee, parent, spouse, sibling, grandparent. So it's pretty broad, but it is a hierarchy. So for example, if a representative payee was serving in that capacity, but then a parent or a sibling might be better suited, they could serve in that capacity over a rep payee.
So we've given advice on a lot of different things, and we've also talked about how to find, an attorney who could help individuals set up a special needs trust. But what if someone is looking for a financial advisor? Keith, what kind of advice would you give, when someone's kind of on the hunt for someone who can kind of help them start thinking about long-term savings goals?
Sure. So while ABLE accounts are something that you can do on your own, if you have the level of comfort, experience, and education in terms of investment selection, it might be good to have a coach or a counselor or someone walk alongside you. In my business, that's exactly what we do. I'm going to give you 3 websites of organizations that you can use to source a local financial planner, counselor in your area. The first is an organization I belong to, CFP.net, Certified Financial Planner.net. That's CFP.net. They will give you a search engine so you can find folks in your locale. The second is kind of a cute play on words, but it's called smartasset.com. Again, it's another organization that you can use to source financial advice or a financial advisor. And then finally, this is somewhat of a mouthful, but it's FIND, FINDAN, that's Apple Nancy, AFC.org. That's the Association of Financial Counseling and Planning Education. I don't know how they got that word, those letters together, but find a NAFC.org. And any one of those 3 sources, I think, can help you identify someone that could step alongside you and give you some advice. As I started from the beginning, investments, and John reiterated, investments do have risk. Establishing your level of risk is important. We typically use a risk tolerance questionnaire that helps an advisor and helps you figure out, what do I really have tolerance for if the market decides to do what it's done this year, for example. So again, if you don't have the comfort to do this on your own, then seek out one of those organizations to identify a person who can help you.
Okay, we're coming to, we have 4 minutes left until we hit noon. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Last words, Keith, number one piece of advice you find yourself giving individuals planning for the future.
Begin. In a word, get a plan, establish your objectives, and open the account. I think we've got some really compelling reasons that we've shared today on why you might want to open an account, but you got to begin the process. Don't put it off any longer.
John, same question.
So I'm gonna copy what Keith said and say begin, but on top of that, if you do begin before November 11th, we're giving all new account holders $50. So I'm giving you a $50 incentive to begin, right? So, but no, I think it's as we go around, Able United goes around and does presentations to all kinds of disability groups, to organizations. The thing I hear quite frequently is, parents are overwhelmed, especially if it's a young child, or even as, if they have an adult child, where life changes, life happens. It's bouncing in between medical appointments, or it's trying to figure out, for us, it's just trying to figure out what we're going to eat for dinner. And there's a lot. And what I hear about people who open an Able account is it's simple. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's such a great accomplishment. I know when I've set up college savings accounts for my kids, to know that I'm doing something, although it's just $25 a month I'm putting into each of their accounts. It's something knowing that when they are, and if they are able to go to college, that they'll have that there for them. And so I think that's why I tell people is just taking the 15, 20 minutes and getting it done.
That's right. Okay, everyone, knowledge is power, and we are so appreciative of each of you for taking time out of your mornings to discuss this important topic. Of course, if we did not address your specific question during today's roundtable, feel free to drop us a line. We're at info@ableunited.com, and we will try to answer as many of your questions as we can. And as John mentioned, we encourage you to sign up, save up. Now through November 11th, when you open an Able United account, you'll receive that free $50 contribution. And before we go, I want to make note that the information presented as part of our roundtable is for general information purposes only, and of course is not going to constitute tax or investment advice. Performance of the Able United program is not guaranteed, as John mentioned, and is subject to market conditions, among other things. We certainly encourage you to carefully consider your objectives, your risks, your charges and expenses before investing, because as with any investment, it is possible to lose money by investing in this program. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.